Hello, and welcome back to the FODcast, the future of all things digital commerce. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Marina Milojkovic. I knew I'd get that wrong.
It's
Nailed
okay.
it in the warm-up, eh?
It's okay.
Today, I'm pleased to welcome Marina Milojkovic, VP of UK for Grebban, a leading design and e-commerce agency based in Northern Europe and the UK. Now, Marina's been leading the UK expansion for Grebban, who are key partners to both Centra and Shopify, two of the most spoken about platforms in the UK digital commerce space right now. Fittingly, we'll be diving into TCO, complexity, and where brands actually win, because in reality, most issues don't come from the platform you're on, they come from how businesses use it. On a personal note, I'm having more and more conversations around TCO and Shopify and how it's not always as low as you might think. But currently I'm hogging the show. So before we jump in, Marina, do you want to give our listeners a quick overview of your experience and your role in Grebban?
Cool. Thanks so much, James. It's great to be here. I'm very excited. I think you did a good job with the last name. It's
Thank
never
you.
easy. But yeah, so I'm Marina, VP UK, but that doesn't really kind of describe what I do. But yeah, I mean, I head up our UK expansion. We've been present in the UK now for 2 years. I myself also, advise the brands that we work with, both in terms of, design and brand agendas, but then also everything tech. Even, we're going to do a re-platform and advice on that, but even also like the, nitty-gritty details of how they should set up their architecture or functional requirements and stuff like that. So, everything from how do they, realize the brand online to what, tech do they need to support that. So that's kind of my role. And like you said, we work with both Centra and Shopify and a couple of other platforms, but those are the main ones. We kind of say as an agency that we create digital flagship stores. So we're heavily focused on design and brand. And we do work with a lot of fashion brands that, of course, sits very well with that. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, someone that has conversations similar to hopefully how our one goes today, every week with different customers of different shapes and sizes. Is it fair to say that you speak to customers across both Northern Europe and the UK, Marina?
Yes, we actually do have a few US clients as well. But yeah, so I mean my area is obviously the UK, but we have brands that we've worked with for, 7-8 years here back in Sweden. So of course I give a lot of attention to them as well. So we operate both in terms of, you know, retainer and new dev, but then also like re-platform projects or redesign projects. So we kind of always have a long-standing relationship with our brand. So I'm a bit all over the place, but UK is my main focus.
Awesome. All right, so let's jump in with TCO, total cost of ownership. I touched upon it at the start. I think if we go back for as many years as we would like, you've often associated Shopify with reducing TCO. Interestingly, over the last 6 months in particular, I've been involved in more conversations where maybe that's not the case. And I know you've done some interesting work on this area, particularly in the last kind of 6 to 12 months. So I think let's start with the myth that is Shopify will reduce your TCO. Talk to me about that.
Cool. Yeah. So I mean, I think where it usually starts is that, like you say, like, oh, we need to reduce TCO. Let's go Shopify. And I think where you kind of start with that is that, you do a spreadsheet and you put up all the tools and services and hosting costs and all of that you have today, and you kind of then, direct compare that to Shopify, and then there's only like one line because it's Shopify and everything's in there basically. Then you add a couple of apps and so on. But I think where kind of this perception and hopefully, what people start realizing, or, what we do or what I do when I do this exercise, is that I feel like brands tend to, look, year one, maybe year two, and then they kind of forget what happens, year 3 or 4, which, if you're a brand, you expect growth. And so I think what we see with Shopify, yeah, it reduces the TCO maybe year 1, 2, but then year 3 and 4, actually that's not the case, because many different reasons that we'll probably come to. And that's where we actually then have seen that, a TCO on Centra actually is lower year, even two sometimes, but depends on obviously how aggressive your growth goal are. But generally, like Shopify is lower, like year 1, 2, but then we've seen recently that Centra kind of outperforms Shopify there. So I think that's the whole, like, that brands kind of tend to look at, what is it today and what's it going to be next year, but then they don't kind of compare the TCO with like the expected growth, so to say.
And that's a really interesting point you make, and I find that quite interesting because as a brand, like you said, you expect to grow. Also, now I completely understand that predicting what's going to happen in 3 years from now is going to be incredibly tough, particularly of how the last couple of years have gone. But you need to take that into consideration when doing something large like a replatform. So why is it that you believe brands don't look at sort of 3 or 4 years ahead? Is there a particular reason?
Actually, I don't think there is a particular reason. I think it's sometimes I meet brands or I talk to brands where the TCO has just like skyrocketed. They could actually be on Shopify already, or another platform, and they end up with so many apps, so many custom things, and all of that. So I think there's no like clear answer. I think it's the kind of easy way to go about it. I think people kind of underestimate how much time you also need to spend doing a TCO. Like, we usually call it a discovery because it's not a TCO is just a small piece of the puzzle when you kind of do this whole. I mean, often you come to a TCO when you're doing a replatform, or you're identifying that you need to do a replatform. So I think again, I don't think there's a clear answer on why brands look at this year, next year, but yeah.
Okay. Outside of the apps that say come with Shopify, what other areas do they not evaluate fully when it comes to TCO?
I think the biggest mistake, and this goes for all platforms, I think the biggest mistake brands do when doing the TCO exercise is not kind of including what the time spent on the tools. Like, license fees is one thing, but how do you operate with these tools and this platform? How much time do you need to spend? Because obviously time is money. So if you have an e-com coordinator or e-com manager, how much time do they actually have to spend to understand that app or that integration to get like the most out of it? So I think it's easy to have that spreadsheet and kind of pretend this is just a line item exercise, but it's also like, what's the organization like? Who are we going to hire? Who what team sits where? Who works together? So I think that's also something super important when it comes to looking at the TCO, and not only looking at what is the actual license fee here, what is also like, how much time do we need to spend on the different platforms, tools, and all of that in the architecture also.
Yeah, that's something that's super important. Definitely. Not that you obviously got time, but I guess also you look at like the actual headcount as well. How many people
Yeah,
do you need within
exactly.
the business to fulfill that
Exactly.
role, and what are their average salaries, and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
Obviously, you mentioned about the central piece, and obviously, given your key partners to Shopify, a lot of this conversation will focus on those platforms. But just last week, I spoke to somebody who's a big Salesforce partner,
Mm.
and they said they did a TCO exercise, and for the business that they have evaluated or reviewed, the Salesforce came in like, I think, can't remember the exact number, but it's substantially lower TCO than it was Shopify for that business. I think they were like a 70 mil turnover
Oh, wow.
retail brand,
Mm.
which I found quite interesting. It's the first time I've had Salesforce amongst
Mhm.
that
Right,
reduced TCO conversation,
right.
and it sounds like they're going to be attacking that market somewhat. So I'm quite interested to see how
Exactly.
it all pans out over this year.
Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting, and like you said, headcount, and then of course, like, and we'll probably get into that later on, but what can AI do with like optimization and automation and all of that? So I think the whole like TCO exercise is just gonna evolve, and I see that. I mean, when I did the TCO like 2 years ago, it was very much a line sheet, exercise, and I do feel like now people look at the broader, perspective around it, and but yeah, I think we need to start, looking at what happens year 3 and 4, and like you say, even if it's impossible to know what's in the future these days, you still have your growth plan. You still, are you going to enter new markets, new product categories? Are you going to expand the team or not? Like you still have your ambition and you have your business goals and business plan and all of that. So I think TCO is going to become more and more just, more things in it, and just not like this is the license fees.
Yeah. Like particularly for those that are ambitious, right? Like you said, that want to unlock new markets and
Exactly.
grow in new areas, that's going to have a substantial impact. So something that you need to be considering. So do you feel as though when you have these conversations with customers, they believe that to reduce their TCO, they need to re-platform, or do many kind of think they can reduce their TCO maintaining their current technology stack?
I would say both. Again, maybe a boring answer, but like we do see. I mean, we do projects where they're on Shopify and they want to stay on Shopify, but they want to rebuild it. So often, and we'll probably get more into this as well, but like you get to a point where like you've created a monster basically, and so you're looking to redesign, and that's usually when we come into the picture, and we kind of do an audit on like the Shopify setup, so to say, and that's when we kind of can come with the recommendation like, oh wait, you have 2 things that basically does the same thing here. So I think it's not necessarily that the TCO comes in play when you re-platform. It's when you kind of take that step back and like we're redesigning or rebuilding, because again, you can be on Shopify and stay on Shopify as well. So we see that a lot as well, where the conversation starts from a redesign perspective. The site is maybe 3-4 years old. They haven't invested in design or brand or UX or customer journey, and while they do that and we do a redesign and we're implementing that new design, let's also kind of rebuild the front end and that ecosystem. So I think that's something that more brands on Shopify should do. They should do that kind of TCO audit or discovery every 2-3 year maybe.
Okay, I was going to ask actually, how often should they do this?
Yeah, because I mean, again, it depends on size of brand and team, and if it's a big team, then a lot of stuff probably gets added on top. But if it's a small team, a lean team, they hopefully know what they're doing, and they're not adding stuff to solve one problem and then adding something else to solve another problem. But so I think it's healthy to do it as often as not possible, but I think 2-3 years is. Because if you're doing a redesign or bigger initiatives, why not? And if you have the right partner or right agency or freelancer or whatever, like there's so much knowledge also in the space. So like take advantage of that basically.
Yeah, I just think from the outside in, it seems like a very sensible exercise to be doing something like this every 2 years if you can, definitely every 3 years.
Yeah.
Obviously, technology's evolving so fast.
Mm.
Obviously, we'll talk about AI, I'm sure, in a fair amount of
Yeah.
detail shortly. Obviously,
Yeah.
the market's constantly changing. Obviously, if your business is growing as well, like your plans could evolve and look at new
Exactly.
markets. Like it seems like an exercise that's certainly something you want to be doing relatively regularly, like you said, without
And
overkill. So.
maybe even more often if we look into the future, and or if we look back a year in 2025, we got new, like the market and the possibilities and capabilities almost changed every month with both AI, tariffs, the world, so to say. Maybe we'll come to a place where this is something every brand has in their roadmap every year. Like as much as you optimize page speed every year, you also have a ticket in your sprint that's like TCO. Maybe that's the future. I don't know, but
Maybe we get to a point where we use AI to do our TCO check entirely, and it runs it
what? Probably.
automatically every 12 months, right? Just in the background, and then pops up. So
Exactly.
yeah, who
This is
knows, right?
spiraling. Take a look at this. That's a good business idea.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Well, Not one that I'm good enough to set up, but there you go. Freebie for anyone listening.
Exactly. That's on us.
So that we spoke a bit about apps and a bit of complexity, and I think it'd be good to talk a bit more about that, because I guess, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of chats that I have reference complexity and over app usage, or however you want to talk of, maybe bloated tech stacks. Seems, if we're looking at Shopify, which I'll reference quite a bit, it seems like a lot of companies pay for a lot of apps. They don't need them. They don't use them. Like, let's focus on complexity itself, and why is it a growing problem?
I think this is also interesting, and we do work with a lot of like mid-sized brands, so I see this a lot, and with all respect to them, it's so easy to get there. I just want to get that out there for any mid-sized small brand who listens to this. Like, it's it I see it happen so easy, especially then with Shopify, because like you say, like, there's an app, I download it, I install it, and oh, it didn't quite do what I expected. Let's add this other thing that I saw. So I think it happens so easily, and that it, you kind of get blind, so to say. Like, I think people add, and then it's so hard to kind of go back and like uninstall, because then you're kind of scared of, like, if you remove this little thing, what will happen? So I think, it's easy to add, but it's even harder to remove, so to say, because you don't know the dependencies and so on. So I don't know if that was an answer to your question, but um, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, if it's easy to add them, then you can quickly get sucked into adding and adding and adding, and then I guess you get to a point where you don't know what they're doing. You don't know what's
Mm,
being used or how it's being used.
mm,
You may even have two apps doing the same thing.
mm.
Try and compare it to a phone. I look at my phone, and I'll just randomly download an app, and I'll never use it. And then it's there, and I've probably got about
Never remove
30
it.
of them at the minute.
Yeah.
And I've started to try and remove them, but I guess the difference here is these are integrated into
Yeah.
your business. They're probably
Mm.
doing something,
I think
possibly paying for them as well, right? And
Yeah, and I think also what's important here, and we'll probably get to that more as well, like, having clear ownership. I think that's also something that, say you have an ecom team of like 4 or 5 people, you have like the ecom director and an ecom manager, and then you have a ecom coordinator, and you have 4 people that all can install apps, and you have kind of no clear ownership, and then someone leaves the business, and then someone comes and they have experience with this great app that helped them in their previous brand, so they're going to use that because that's going to make their job easier. So I think, again, like, I think clear ownership on a Shopify setup is super important. I think that's when I see a really, really like lean and good setup on Shopify, there's clear ownership. Like,
okay,
I am, I'm responsible for this integration or app, or even on Centra and Headless, like, in doing, API integrations and all of that. Like, if you have clear ownership and it's documented and how it's used and why and what for, that's when we see the best setups. And I think that's like the reality that we come from, that, again, it's been so easy, so people just like, and then leave businesses, come back, new businesses, and there's no clear ownership. I think that's a risk.
ownership seems to be the issue. So
Mm.
I guess that there's going to be a lot. Every business is has its is unique in its own way, right? But I guess if you take the Grebban's sort of standard ICP, what would a lean um, setup look like to you?
I mean, if you go into Shopify and what we see, so I mean, we do work with like B2B and other like segments and so on, but our biggest ICP is obviously like fashion brands, international, women's fashion, men's fashion, mid-size, uh, sell, global, maybe an ecom team of 6, 7 people. They focus a lot on brand design and so on. That's kind of like the typical Grebban client, like Osprey London in the UK, or NN07, and brands like that. So I think what's interesting now is that, so usually a brand comes to us, they're on Shopify or another platform, and they're either, like I said, doing a redesign, staying on Shopify but rebuilding everything, or they're replatforming to Centra or Shopify. And we kind of advise, if it's Shopify, we do Shopify, we use Shopify for everything that it's good at. But if there is, and then obviously you use apps for things, maybe you have 3 or 4 apps that you need. But what I think it's important to mention here is that, and what I see more and more is that, so we don't do much Shopify headless, but if, for some brands that we work with, often, founder-led, strong brands with strong community, maybe they want to do something super custom with like UGC or community or loyalty or, stuff like that. We kind of now tend to see how can we do that API first, even on a Shopify headless or not on a Shopify setup. So it's standard Shopify, so to say, but say that we would integrate Yotpo API first, because we want that experience to be, fully brand focused. So I think that's something interesting also. Like, you have the Shopify setup, you have quite few apps that really does what you want them to do, but then you kind of double down on like one service that like your business is all about, say community or loyalty. And that's when we do something custom, on top of everything else. And I think that's something that we're going to see more and more. And I think, again, that's super common when you look at a headless setup, or like if we go with Centra. And I think what's interesting there is that, people, brands, and especially, this is what I see in the UK. I think it's different here in Sweden. But in the UK, where like headless kind of has a bad reputation currently, like, oh, it's over engineering, it's getting crazy basically. But we kind of have on Centra, and we've been Centra partners for over 10 years, so we kind of have a good tech stack and architecture that we recommend, which again is like, you have the Centra as the core, like, ecom platform, and you have a CRM, you maybe have a tool for search and merch, fewer but better, and API first basically. So I think for both Shopify and Centra, we do see brands focusing on fewer and kind of better and bigger, so to say, and like, because there's so many good ones out there that can really do. I think we come from, there was a lot of apps doing one thing, and like you have this for this and that for that, but now we see, obviously the whole like ecosystem around e-commerce is evolving every day. So we do see brands kind of doing fewer but kind of deeper, so to say, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense actually, which I guess going back to your point around the ecosystem around commerce evolving somewhat would also explain why there are businesses with more and more apps, because they're like, oh, let's try this, and there's that app there, let's try that, and you're always looking for that shiny new thing when you may or may not even need it, right?
Yeah.
Interestingly, I spoke to a couple of other Shopify partners, and they were saying they obviously do audits, as I'm sure you guys do, and often there'll be businesses with like 30 apps, but they use like 5 of them, or they need 5 of them. And I found that crazy, the amount of money that must get wasted. It's insane.
No, I mean, I've seen setups that kind of stresses me out. I'm like, how did you even know that you have this? Like, I am a person myself. Like, if you would look at my phone, I have like 10 apps. Like, I'm not an app person, so
Oh
maybe
wow,
that's
okay.
why. But like, and I kind of like stuff clean and structured and all of that. But like you say, I mean, I see brands with like even more than 30 apps, and it's like, and then you ask them like, what do you use that for? And they're like, oh, that someone else installed that. She or he is no longer in the business. So I think this happens a lot because people move around and all of that. So, back to my point of like ownership again. And I think again, mentioning like in the UK, people are a bit scared, or like, they see a big risk with headless. And I think again, if you do headless, if you go Centra and all of that, or even other platforms, again, ownership. Like if you have clear ownership over, a headless architecture, you're safe. You're good.
You're right in what you say about headless. Like, I feel like it's such a Marmite word. Like, you're really pro it, or you're really anti it, and it amazes me.
Really, yeah, no, and again, like in Sweden, and obviously since Centra is a massive platform here, and in Scandinavia, but I also think maybe we need to kind of like rebrand Headless or call it somewhat something else, or but I think again, like people, because we have brands that have an e-com team of 3 people on a Centra Headless solution, and it works perfectly. And it's because like they have clear responsibilities, clear ownership. They know why every integration or service is there. They know what it does and what it supports, and the dependencies and all of that. So I think that's also something that uh, maybe going off topic now, but that brands see that oh, if you're going headless, you need a big team. Last year we launched 2 Centra sites, or actually one of them is launching very soon. The team is like 3 people. And I find that quite interesting as well.
So that's a big misconception then, that you need a big team for something headless.
I think so, yeah, because
Yeah.
like it's this big, scary thing. And yeah, this brand that we're launching later in the spring, that kind of conversation, they were on Magento, and that conversation kind of started from like, oh, we need to re-platform, like we can't stay on Magento. We know about Shopify, but we've never heard about Centra, so obviously like we had to do a discovery, and they're kind of redoing everything, ERP and all of that. It's a UK brand, so, and again, that's where the TCO and Centra ended up lower, like year 3, 4. But again, it's basically it's even a team of 2, depending on how you see it, because
Okay.
2 or 3, it depends on what the MD kind of wants to do.
So
But yeah,
just on
so
that note quickly then, so do you
Mhm.
feel as though, just going back to this headless piece, I feel as though it is that kind of Marmite word in the UK, and
Mm, mm,
part of me feels it's because a lot of businesses probably jumped on the bandwagon of going down the headless route without really understanding if they needed to.
yes.
As such, they've embarked on a piece of work that probably cost them more money than they were expecting.
Mm,
They probably weren't sure what success looked like, so they
mm.
potentially saw it as a failure, and as such, it's now um, just left a trail of devastation, like in its wake, basically. Do you feel as though that's the reality of what happened, Marina, or have I kind of got the wrong end of the stick there?
No, I think you're absolutely right, especially with like they didn't know what success would look like. I think that's a super interesting thing here, and I think that again comes from like it still is, but it was a new thing. So I think that's super interesting, and that again comes back to like why we always kick off projects with a discovery, and especially if it is around like re-platforming, or like are we staying on Shopify, or are we moving away from Magento or whatever. Always start with the why would we do this, why would we go headless, what would what possibilities would unlock. In this case that I referred to, like their super like design and brand is so important, and I think that's we kind of work with ecom an ecom platform kind of scorecard, where we kind of bench different business goals and business setups and all of that, where we kind of score different platforms. That's usually also something like TCO, ecom platform scorecard, and a couple of other things is always a part of a discovery. And um, I think again, people who went headless too quickly didn't do this exercise of like why. Like it was the new kid on the block maybe, and like, oh, let's do this. But I think it's
Mm.
super interesting what you say of like they didn't define what success would be like. And I think again, like when we talk to brands that are either going Shopify or Centra, it's like, what do you want, again, like with the TCO, what do you want year 3 and 4 to look like? And I think again, when it comes to also this conversation, which is important to mention, is that uh, and it's also a conversation that I have with a lot of like design heavy or like brand heavy brands. Like, do you want to bet on brand, or do you kind of want to bet on the platform? Because that's also really the difference here. If you go the Shopify route, you kind of bet on that platform. What they develop for you, that's kind of what you get. And if you take the other route, say with Centra, of course you bet on the platform, but you'll also have more flexibility. You can do more customization. You can do things around the platform in an easier way. So I think that's also very important. And if you and again, like betting on Shopify is so good. Like obviously it's the world's biggest platform, so totally get that. But if you're a brand, I usually say, and maybe it's a weird, but like imagine you're at Prada, but then you go to the checkout, and that's a Boots self-scan. That's pretty much Shopify. You can do the coolest experience. It's safe, it's good. But then when you come to the checkout, you can't do anything. Basically, it's standard. But if you go Centra, you own the whole customer journey. So and
Do you know, I quite like the Shopify checkout. I'm not gonna lie, it's
great.
probably my preferred checkout.
It's great, and I mean I use it not every day, but every week at least. But it's obviously really good. It's probably the best checkout out there because it's probably the most used one, so they have the most data and they optimize it all the time. So I'm not saying it's bad. It's more that, again, like how important is brand for you? And again, like I think the Prada kind of analogy is interesting here, because like it is really like you have this like super nice experience, but then you kind of end up it's just the same for everyone. And some brands don't care about that, but I think the checkout is just one example. Obviously we see with Shopify like my account and other sections that they kind of not lock up more and more, but basically like you can't do as much customization. So I think that's getting into this discovery of like, why would we go headless? Why would we go Centra? What is important? Is it getting up quick, getting the site up quick and kind of do trade? Shopify is great. But if you kind of really want to put time and effort on brand and that whole experience and creating desire and all of that, then maybe Centra is a better option. But both are great platforms.
Yeah, and that's it, right? I think it's fair to say that they're both great platforms.
They are.
There's also plenty of other very good platforms out there. I think we're quite fortunate to have as the choice that we have. I've been recruiting now for 15 years in the commerce world, and for a long time it was Hybris, Magento, Demandware. Obviously there was IBM, but that was kind of phasing out as I was moving into it. And then you had like WooCommerce, right? But I never did much in WooCommerce. And now we're looking at far more platforms.
Yeah.
I think someone told me the other day there's like 500 e-commerce platforms, which I found astonishing. I thought there was like 25, but I guess there's
500
apparently globally. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of unique ones in like Asia and what have you. Do you know what I mean? That maybe we're not familiar with. But there's some really cool platforms, and you can do some really cool things on them. Interestingly, we spoke about Headless and how maybe the myth around the complexity and the technical know-how to manage it, it is exaggerated kind of thing. I guess I look at Centra, obviously it's a headless first platform, built composability in mind. We had this whole composable shift a couple of years ago, didn't we, where a lot of companies similar to Headless, they went down the composable journey, realized they bit off a bit more they could chew. They couldn't handle it. They didn't have enough money. They didn't define what success looked like. How is Centra different? Because you're talking, the way you're explaining Centra to me is that it gives the flexibility, but it doesn't have the complexity, which I find really interesting. And maybe I've just misunderstood. Obviously, I'm looking at this from a super non-technical point of view, right?
I'm like,
but if you do get that flexibility without all of the depth of complexity, then it sounds like a really compelling platform and proposition for brands.
Yeah, I'm like, is this a too difficult question for me to answer? But we'll cut it out if I don't come up with anything.
Okay. Even high level would be good to hear your thoughts, right? Even just for me personally. So there we go.
Yeah, but I think again, I mean, it also, and obviously I am going to say this because I'm an agency person, but again, sometimes I do think that brands kind of start in the wrong side of things. usually they, come and say like, oh, we're going to re-platform, and they kind of pick the platform first. I would maybe advise to the other way around. And obviously, again, like I'm agency, so I'm going to say that, but also like not even agency. Like there's a lot of like, e-com experts and, all of that. So I would maybe like pick your partner first, because they are going to answer these questions. And I think, again, uh, I think we're maturing in that space, and I think that's what Centra learned pretty fast. That like, let's, their go-to-market strategy is like partners, and if they educate their partners and agencies that build on the platform, that's gonna, make things a lot better and easier. So I think, again, it comes down to who kind of builds it as well. So, usually, because Centra is obviously, the e-com platform, but if you go Centra, you sometimes even don't need a PIM because you have everything in there. So you have Centra, and then you maybe have like an ERP, Centra and down. But on top of that, obviously you have a CMS, you have a CRM, and then you have, a couple of more, integrations that you need. If you're very omni heavy and you have stores, obviously you have something for that. If you work with community and reviews and all that, you have something for that. So, and we also, since we have so many Centra brands, we also have something that we call an accelerator, where we kind of have a lot of API integrations because, e-com businesses, fashion brands that we work with tend to all have the um, same needs, but also same challenges, and they all kind of have the same reality. So again, it comes down to working with the right partner. So, and I know that other, central agencies have this as well, but like we have an accelerator, which makes us, quicker, faster, because if we do something for one brand, we can kind of reuse it and do it for another brand, but, obviously customized design for them. So I think, again, like with Centra, there's a lot of possibilities for agencies to kind of do their take on it as well.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if that answer makes sense, to be honest.
It made sense to me. I kind of get where you're coming from in terms
Yeah.
of you've got the core out of the box functionalities, which are very good. Obviously, you can customize them if you want to, like some of the other platforms. But actually, while it's built kind of composability in mind, it's not necessarily just a e-commerce platform like a Commerce Tools, for example, where
Mm,
you would need the other components.
exactly.
Yeah. So okay.
Yeah, I mean, Centra has a lot of features where like we have brands that never, use those features. So I think, you don't have to use everything. And again, like as mentioned, like you kind of need to bet on the platform that you decide on. And I think that again, like betting on Shopify, they have a very, broad roadmap. Obviously, you can sell everything from beauty, fashion, Shopify is for everyone basically. But I think what's interesting with Centra is that it's so fashion focused. So everything, they even have like a B2B wholesale module as well. But I think that what's super interesting is that they solely kind of develop their roadmap for fashion brands, and that's why they're so heavy on omni and all the kind of fashion brand needs.
Yeah, and that's something I really like about the platform and
Mm.
how they build it for a specific target audience. And I think that's why it's probably doing well. It's obviously a great platform, but you need to have a strong USP when approaching a new
Mm.
market. There is a lot of commerce platforms like we've discussed. What makes you stand out? Cool. This is why. This is our
Mm.
ICP, right? Bang.
Yeah.
So okay. Now look, you touched upon it earlier around like how brands can stand out. Is it about do you want to double down on the technology? Do you want to focus on how your brand stands out, like branding, design, etc.? I mean, it'd be good to talk about that for a little bit because
Mhm.
some of the some of the really successful brands, some of the cool brands, they are investing in UX. They're investing in how their website looks, storytelling, etc.
Mm.
Are you finding that your conversations are different slightly from technology to branding?
100%. And this is what I'm most excited about, obviously. But yes, I mean, I think it really comes from two things. One is that, tech has become so democratized. Like, you know, anyone basically can get an e-com up and running. again, thanks to Shopify. Like, it's so democratized tech, it's so modular. Like, anyone can basically today, with tools like Lovable and everything that's super interesting. So that's one thing, that tech is so much easier today than it was. So finally, people are talking about design and UX and customer journey and all of that. So that's one thing, which is like the reason to this. And I think number two is, there's so many brands out there. There is so much clothes if we, focus on fashion. And if you don't stand up, or stand out, if you don't have the best product, if you don't create desire, people are not going to come back. Like, if I, need to buy a dress, like, it's not hard to find a dress today. It is what's difficult is for a brand is to find people that stay loyal. And how do you get people to come back and stay loyal? You create desire, and that comes down to everything from the product, obviously, and the packaging, but also the site. So we've seen brands. I'm going to take Prada as an example again.
Like Prada, eh?
Right. They spend millions and millions of dollars on their physical stores. The site is cool. It's not a bad example for a site, but it I think it's still amazing how the biggest fashion brands out there kind of treat their e-com site as just a product catalog basically. So I think there's so much opportunity here, and I think that's why the conversation is shifting finally.
Finally, it sounds like it's been long overdue from your point of view. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it as prominent as you feel it should be, or do you feel like we're just at the start of that journey?
We're just at a start. I feel like there's so much more to do here, and it's such a big shift. I mean, um I meet a lot of brands where like, oh, but where does that budget sit with brand, or does it sit with marketing, or does it sit with tech? And then they take a look, because it's the site and you need the tech to develop what we design, but it's also design, so it could sit with brand. So we're in the early stages of this, I think. And also, then who owns it? Is it a brand director that owns kind of the e-com design, or is that the e-com team? That also depends on how the organization is set up. So there's no like one answer to this, and I think that proves that it's still very early stages, but it's very exciting, and I think this is really the future. And again, with like AI and everything, tech is just going to be even more simple, and the possibilities are endless. And I think how a brand can stand out is really focusing on, again, like brand design, creating desire.
Yeah, Joe, I see that as something that's really cool. For a while now, many have said commerce is just a commodity, and you've kind of said the same, right? Tech is tech. It does largely does the same regardless. So how can you stand out? How can you? Brands are spending so much money to storytell and to promote their brand, engaging communities and do all that cool stuff. You need to take the customer through that same journey on your website. And
Yeah.
like you said, I feel like we are just at the start of it now. I mean, is there any brands that come to mind that you think do a really good job with this right now, Marina?
I mean, I wish that I had more to say here, obviously. But I think, we work with Represent. I think they're doing an amazing job, because they really push us and they want to invest in this. And I think, they're one of the early adopters of like this whole thinking, which I think is so cool. And obviously it works. I think, a brand that's really, really also good at this is Aesop. Like, I think maybe Aesop is one of the few brands where, if I go online or if I'm in a store, it's somewhat similar. Like, I get it's not two like completely different experiences. But yeah, I wish that I could say more brands here, but maybe ask me in a year again and I'll
Yeah.
have a
Okay.
few more
I,
examples.
I do agree. I see it being a bigger area of investment for many. I guess the challenge for many will be, like you say, like where does this budget come
Mm,
from? Do they just add in the budget, or do they have to take it from somewhere else?
mm.
Chances are it's going to be taking it from somewhere else. What then
Which
gets
again is,
compromised, right?
and interesting, because like brands, especially, fashion brands, spend a lot of money on marketing, ads, all of that. And they change their ads and their marketing, some brands do it every month with like, the content and the visuals, but the site stays the same for like 2 years. And it's like, whoa, wait. So you drive all this traffic, but they get the same kind of features and experience and customer journeys every time they go to the site. That to me is like astonishing. Like they should move a bit of that budget into the site, because like that's what, why people would come back. There has to be, some sort of, new features, new experiences on the site.
When you say it like that, it sounds so basic, but it's certainly something that's overlooked.
It's also like, brands in their physical stores, they hang things differently every month because they have a new collection, and then they do this like cool display of this new shoe. And I think again, Represent it's a very good example for this, where like we did this like completely new design, like a PDP for a new shoe that they were launching, and this was a custom PDP for this shoe. And that's how you treat products in store, right? You have this big launch of a new product, and you do a cool window and you do a cool display in store, but then when it gets online, it's just on a PLP, like everything else. And I think that's what's cool with Represent, that they kind of push that, and like we're launching a shoe and that's going to be an experience online as well. And I wish more would do that.
Yeah, like you said, when you say that, it sounds so basic, and
Right.
probably not such a big change either, and it's
No,
not something that costs a huge amount of money either,
no.
but can have a big impact. And even as a customer, if you go on a website and it's a brand you shop with a lot, if the website's always the same, it just becomes a bit of noise, right? Whereas if it's changing and interacting with you in a different way, oh, cool, that's new. I didn't notice that last time. Oh, what else is new? You have a look. You're intrigued.
Exactly.
You stay. So.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. All right. Just quickly on this note, then, do you feel as though the appetite to invest here, to change, evolve, is stronger with some of the younger brands, like a Represent, for example?
Yeah, I would say so. But then again, like I feel like this is like a, bubbling market across everywhere. Of course, like the younger, like I haven't used the word D2C in a very long time, but it makes sense here. Like if you're launched as like digital first, you kind of, that comes with it. But I mean, we do see, you know, heritage brands kind of, I mean, Osprey London, I think, is a super good case of this, where we redid their site 2 years ago. Where, and they did a whole like repositioning and rebrand and all of that, but where like they are very obviously like physically driven product, but like how do we translate that to navigation, to guidance, to kind of exploring that product online? So I think we see this across like both heritage brands with, a strong physical presence, and younger founder-led brands, I'd say.
Yeah. All right, I like it. I'm going to be paying a lot more attention to websites as and when I go on them, and seeing what changes come up and everything else. So
Yeah.
interesting. Right, let's move on to the quick fire questions before we wrap things up, Marina. That's part of the show that I really enjoy. Just going to chuck a couple of questions at you. Let's try and keep it quick.
Yeah.
So I think I probably know the answer to this first one, given how we've just ended it. But what is the most underrated investment in e-commerce right now?
Yeah, it's kind of what we just said. I mean, again, I think this is where the opportunity lays. Like if you want people to come back, you kind of need to give them something to come back to. It's that easy. And when I travel, or if I go into my favorite brands and their physical stores, sometimes I go just to browse, because I know there's something new, or they did something cool with the store. So yeah, I think that's like the most important thing.
Yeah, all right. Nearly quick. Kind
Yeah.
of quick. Okay. What's one thing retailers should stop? What's the one thing retailers should stop doing immediately? Put yourself out there.
Maybe controversial, but like maybe believing that AI is going to solve everything, because that's something,
Okay.
maybe a bit like, but I AI is great, but I think it's also like it's Now it's just gonna be a long answer.
No, we'll leave it. We'll pause it. We'll cut it at
Yeah.
AI is going to solve everything. That's a bold dun dun dun.
But then I do have examples where, like, I mean, I do want to mention, like, this new, like, UCP thing where, like, AI startups like MFOS is gonna make your life so much easier, like getting your product data and your whole product catalog like optimized for that. Like, that's when AI plays a massive role. Or like, there's another startup from Sweden called Dema where, you get your data right, you understand your data. So obviously, like, AI is going to help you a lot, but I think it is a bit uh, risky to think that it's going to save the whole
Everything.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair, right? I think that's fair. What if you could describe Headless in one phrase, how do you describe it?
Now you're pushing me with short answers. No, but I would say brand possibilities. Maybe that's 2 words, but
That is a super short one. There we go.
brand
There you go.
possibilities. There you have it.
That's made up for all the other long ones, right? And
Yeah.
then finally, what's one metric retail leaders should obsess over this year?
I mean, talking about this whole like brand and investing in design and everything, and I obviously get the question of like, oh, but how do we measure that? If we invest a lot in design with you guys, how do we measure that? And to me, there's obviously conversion rate and they sell more, but returning customers. If we do this whole like universe and create desire, people are going to come back.
Love
So I
it.
think that's it.
Returning customers, customer loyalty. I know that's high on the agenda of many brands right now, isn't it? Customer
Right.
loyalty and what have you. So awesome. Well, I think that brings us to a close.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy it?
Yes.
There we go.
It was good.
But let me just quickly wrap this up by saying thank you to everyone for listening. This was another brilliant episode. Thank you for joining me, Marina. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm pleased you did as well. It's great to get a consultative viewpoint on platforms and technology in the market, as well as understanding the importance around evaluating TCO on a regular basis, as well as, most importantly, how you're going to stand out as a brand and potentially turning your budget to brand design and UX. So 2026 is going to be an exciting year, both for the podcast and for those associated to digital commerce. I'll see you next time.
Thank you.